want to establish, if there's a big if there, if we want to establish a in-school tutoring program, then what would be the design principles that we should keep in mind? How would we design a program like that? I think that's the idea behind the program. It's a big paper, so I'm going to go real fast. The first important thing we need to consider is the frequency of the tutoring session. So what research has shown is that when we talk about high dosage tutoring, it talks about more than at least 3 sessions of 30 to 60 minutes per week. And the program should last for a minimum of 10 weeks to the entire school year. For elementary students, even shorter and more frequent sessions can work. And that's how it's going to be the most effective. Occasional sessions do not work, so it has to be a structured program. Intensive vacation academies. So when we talk about vacation academy, it's like a summer break or a summer vacation ke andar agar humne kar liya, ya winter break ke andar kar liya. So these are the vacation classes, holiday classes. And that would work on small groups of struggling students, and they should always be focused on a single subject over a week-long break. So you could take a maths tutoring or an English reading tutoring for a week-long during the vacations. You can run that in your school. Even 10-to-1 programs where we have a batch of 10 students can work. It is more affordable, but the learning gains are slightly less than as compared to a high dosage tutoring. The biggest thing to keep in mind is we need more talented teachers to run this program. And we need to we may not be able to include students who have non-academic issues, behavioral issues, or discipline issues, or attendance issues. Those should be will have to be avoided if we want maximum impact. The second important criteria when we are designing a tutoring program is obviously one-to-one tutoring is most effective but costly. Up to 3 to 4 students at a time is ideal. More than that, you will sacrifice on personalization, and the whole purpose of the tutoring might get lost. And you need very skilled people to run batches of 10 or more tutoring classes. The focus should be very clear that if you look at where the tutoring has been most effective is for reading in foundational years and math for older years. So if you are trying to establish a program for senior school, math should be the focus above middle school. But in primary, maybe it should be focused on improving the reading skills. However, it has been effective at all grades. But the biggest evidence is for these two areas. What kind of people do we require? The first important thing is tutoring skills are not the same as classroom teaching skills. So you do not need you don't need people who are as skilled as your classroom teachers, but you can choose from a wide variety. Senior citizens who have retired from government positions, retired teachers can work, college students can work, volunteers can work, alumni can work, as long as they are fully trained. So you will need to make sure that you have a training induction program for tutors. And in that induction program, you will have to train them. And you may even want to ask them to take a subject-related exam. And if they're a math tutor, ask them to take a sub-math exam. And that is how you can select those people. Training and support, 2 weeks of intensive training has worked really well. And that is not just in mathematics, instructional techniques, social emotional learning, and the culture and all these training have to be given by the school. So you cannot just pick up a guy who is willing to tutor and allow him to tutor. So you'll have to have an induction program where you will train these people to tutor your students. I think that's very important. The teachers will have to provide the support material to these tutors, because these tutors will use the same material that is being used in the classroom instruction. That's very important. So your role as a school is to provide them that material. Again, the research says that it is important to pay these volunteers. Unpaid volunteers are less impactful than paid volunteers. So volunteering does not mean that it's free. You give them a token, and also maybe provide them some respect and recognition on your annual day, and by giving them a certificate. So I think recognizing them for their service is also very important. Another important thing is to measure the impact of the tutoring program. We will have to collect ongoing implementation data. And that will work only if you have defined the learning outcomes of the program very clearly. So even if it's a 1 week program, for example, let's assume that we are having a 1 week intensive program for algebraic skills. I'm talking about math because math is important. So skills of algebra के ऊपर हमने एक हफ्ते का program किया. So उस हफ्ते के program का, it should be very clear what the learning outcomes are, and they should be measured. If it's a longer program, again, it has to be measured very, very thoroughly to make sure that you improve the program. Informal formative assessments are very important so that tutors will understand the needs of the kids and modify the instruction accordingly. I'm going fast because of time. I have shared the paper with everybody. All of those who are interested in going deeper, please go through the paper. But we're just skimming through the entire thing right now. Schools must provide regular professional development to use the data. Formative assessment का data जो आएगा, how do tutors use that data, and how do they address the needs of every student? I think that's very, very important. Relationships make a big difference in a tutoring program. So what you need to do is do not remove the assignment of tutor-tutee very frequently. जितनी देर तक वो tutor-tutee consistently मिलते रहेंगे, their relationship and bond will start developing. That's very important. And that will not only motivate students, but also create a better academic attitude. And that's even address the social emotional well-being. So it's important to pair the student, the tutor and the tutee for a longer period of time. In-school tutoring has shown to be much more effective than after school or during vacations. So although there is a vacation academy, but in-school tutoring during school hours is almost twice as effective as any other means. And it improves attendance also. And facilitates academic focused culture also if it's done in the school. The curriculum, what will be covered in the tutoring session, it has to be exactly what is being done in the classroom. So what is very important and what is different from the coaching culture, because जो normal after school tuition centers हैं और coaching centers हैं, वो एक अपनी speed पे चल रहे होते हैं, वो एक अपने flow में चल रहे होते हैं. But for in-school tutoring program to work, everything must be aligned to what is happening in the classroom. I think that's very important. Remediation, by the way, is not a very good idea. So sometimes what we feel is, let me make his base. Okay, so I will do with the 8th class child what was done in 6th or 7th class. That is not a good idea. Because that only makes students fall further behind. So remediation, using tutoring as a mode of remediation, is not a good idea. We have to focus on exactly what is happening in the class and what are the concepts and skills required for the upcoming class. So अगर circles पढ़ाया जा रहा है, तो circles पे ही tutoring session होगा, वो पिछली class पर नहीं होगा. We should not focus on what the kid has not mastered previously, but focus on what is required for the upcoming lecture. And in some sense, a tutor also helps the classroom teacher and takes some pressure off if he allows the students to, catch up, build that kind of, competencies that the student can come up to the level where he can start understanding what is happening in the class. So remember, this is not a permanent thing. बच्चा पीछे हो गया है, उसको हमें थोड़ी देर के लिए निकाल के 10 हफ्ते की ट्यूटरिंग में डालना है, और ऑब्जेक्टिव ऑफ द ट्यूटरिंग शुड बी दैट नाउ ही कैन लर्न at pace with other students in the class. It's not a permanent thing that is happening, that वो बिल्कुल हमेशा वो tutoring नहीं पड़ेगा. So we make sure that he catches up and he joins the mainstream education that is being done in the school, in the class. We have to build foundational skills, but make connections to the current content that is being covered. That is very, very important. So the curriculum should be aligned to what is happening in the class. The delivery mode, all delivery modes are effective. It's just the degree of effectiveness. So even blended model has proven to be effective. Virtual learning, a one-to-one tutoring session is also effective, depending upon the skills of the tutor. And obviously the one-to-one face-to-face mode is also effective. So you can experiment with any mode that you feel comfortable with, or which allows your school to implement that. So delivery mode is not a problem. You can try with it. Prioritization is a problem. Sometimes when we do need-based tutoring, where we target lower performing students, then there is a stigma that gets attached to the tutoring, where it's seen more as a punishment rather than an opportunity to survive. So we should possibly, avoid doing something that creates a stigma around that. It should be curriculum driven, as we've already said. One of the things you can do is identify where exactly does problem happen. So, for example, just to give you a simple example, is when students grow from 5th to class 6th and algebra is introduced into their lives, then there is a major problem that happens. So, and there is research which says that the introduction of algebra in mathematics is a point in mathematics where students' interest falls down in mathematics and their performance falls down. So maybe you want to have a curriculum-driven tutoring program for these students that at those particular points. And the similar thing happens in class 11th, for example. When a child goes from class 10th to class 11th, suddenly the marks and the performance starts to drop. So you'll have to identify what those areas are in the curriculum which require extra support. Universal tutoring is possibly the best way, but it also increases the cost because you need more number of tutors, right? But if you have a universal tutoring program where any student can opt for tutoring, then the needs of even the mid and high performing students can be addressed equally good. Framing of how do you frame this whole program makes a very big difference. So if you call it a special opportunity rather than remediation, people are more acceptable to that. So if you have to start this, call it a special opportunity, and also make sure that students are recognized and there is some sort of recreation. That has worked very well in some of the tutoring programs, at least in America, according to this paper. The big things you need to be careful about is that first, if you do not do a good tutor-tutee match, then you might worsen the educational inequalities. So it could actually go against you if the tutor-tutee match is not done properly. And the second important thing is that the learning gain will not happen if it is not a well thought of program. If you put it together in a hurry, then you may not see the kind of impact which can actually come. So you have to really design the program very thoroughly by taking all stakeholders in the picture. All the time, every week, I ask Shilpi to come up with some action plans that schools can do and that teachers can do. So here are certain things that we feel schools can do. They can try blended learning over the weekend if the school tutoring is not possible. That's something we can experiment with. And maybe we can experiment it with a few classes and not all classes. So think about giving this program only for 8th class student. So maybe there are 120, 150 students in 8th class. We can start with them and then see how it goes. Make sure it's curriculum driven tutoring. So it's the teacher who is driving the program. So teacher is giving input to the tutor all the time. Tutor pools need to be created from various areas, and obviously you will have to budget in some sort of a cost for this tutoring program. For teachers, again, here are some suggestions to consider. Again, these are suggestions to consider. Teachers should identify the students who need some help. Teachers will be responsible for training and supporting tutors. So the math HOD will have to be given the job to make sure that the tutors in math are well trained and supported throughout their contribution to the school. The tutors will need to get the content and the guidelines depending on the curriculum that the school is following. And also, this should be able to help us, we should be able to reject the coaching culture by telling the parents that, look, we are providing individual feedback and support to students, and refrain from remediation that does not work. So these are some suggestions. I have to make this mandatory announcement that ICSL organizes several Connect to Learn workshops. These are online workshops, also in-school workshops also. And these 5 workshops actually take into account some of the issues that we have discussed during this paper presentation. So I'm going to stop here now and pose the first question to my panelists. How relevant is in-school tutoring to Indian schools? I think that's the first question we need to address. So any one of you who wants to go first, or I'll have to go alphabetically.